Okay, so it's time for us to get back into our coverage over the X-Men. And we now pick up with X Factor issue number 96, 97, and 98. Now, technically, 96 to 98 is part of a 5-part storyline that ends with issue number 100, but I want to save the last 2 chapters of the storyline for tomorrow's video because it's going to lead into the whole idea of somebody possibly dying on the X Factor team. Now, remember, when it comes to Marvel Comics at this time, for X Factor, they were really more of a government team. They worked for the government as a way to build relations between the humans and the mutant race. That was their main goal there. Now, as we all know, with every team in Marvel Comics, they all have their own personal issues. And really, those issues are going to play a somewhat role in today's storyline and also tomorrow's storyline as well. But either way, it's time for us to go ahead and dive into X Factor issue number 96. Now, the opening page by itself kind of tells us that we're going to be given a new character for this storyline and tomorrow's storyline as well. Now, we have no idea who she is, but she is talking about the idea of beginning of a new age. That basically, when it comes to the human race right now, we're all going to die off by some different kinds of factors happening all over the world. Volcanoes erupting, hurricanes, floods. Like basically, once the human race dies off, a new age of men are going to rise up. And this age of men is going to be better than what we are right now in this current time. But now we have to transition over to X Factor. Now, we see X Factor currently at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. Now, we do learn here that the center was recently bombed. And so you have our heroes right now going out of their way to save the lives of the different people who are trapped inside the building that's currently falling apart. Now, we also see for our heroes that they're really bothered about the idea that somebody had bombed this center. Honestly, it's a horrible thing. But right now, for our heroes, it kind of hits them in the heart because now recently, there has been a lot of things happening across America more often than usual. And matter of fact, you have Havoc be that person kind of express that for the entire team, they hate the idea of what's happening to America. Now, for Havoc, once him and X Factor are able to save as many lives as they can, you then have Forge appear. Now, when Forge does appear, he does tell Havoc, hey, listen, you and we gotta go. I gotta talk to you right now because something big is happening. Now, we do see here that Havoc is very upset with Forge. And matter of fact, it will be explained later on in this video. But either way, you have Forge and Havoc walk away to have this conversation. But now we have to jump over to Random. Now, we have talked a lot about this character before. When it comes to Random, he has the ability to adapt to other mutant abilities that he's fighting against. Now, for Random, he's also a mercenary as well. Now, here's the thing. In our last video, he was hired by somebody in the government to go after Polaris, to basically kill her off. Now, that kind of showed that even though Polaris and X Factor do work for the government, there are still people in the government who want to go out of their way to get rid of the mutant race. Now, we're not told who that person was in the government who had basically hired Random, but we see him right now meeting up with that person. And that person is very upset about the fact that, well, Random did not complete the job, that Polaris is still alive. Now, he does still pay Random off, but he does say, you know what, go ahead and leave. And right after he does leave, you have our mysterious person here call up other people who are most likely in the government who agreed to get rid of the mutant race, saying, you know what, we should go ahead and get rid of Random. He knows too much and also he failed us. So now they'll go after Random as well. Now, this leads over to Havoc meeting up with Forge. Now, for Havoc being the hothead he is, he's very upset with Forge because, okay, when it comes to X Factor issue number 95, it takes place way before this issue right here, meaning that in the other X books we covered so far, they take place between that issue and this issue right here. Like, for example, the whole idea of Avengers X-Men Blood Ties. That was a massive storyline that took place over in Genosha. And so for Havoc, he's very upset about the idea that X Factor was not used at all to help out with that situation. At the same time, he just learned in our last video that somebody in the government is coming after Polaris, and most likely it's multiple people. And so he's very upset with Forge because Forge has been gone for weeks apparently, from issue 95 to this issue right here, and apparently a lot of things have popped off and Forge has not been around to help deal with those situations. But it's Forge saying, listen, I've been gone for a very good reason because our next mission is going to be very important. I was being briefed by many different people in the American government. So sit down and let's talk about our next mission. But now we kind of have to talk about the different things going on in the actual group of X Factor, starting off with Wolfbane. As we all know, for Wolfbane, she played a major role back in the Extinction Agenda. Now, in that crossover, her and Havoc were both kidnapped. And when it came to Wolfbane, well, unfortunately, they had her turned into a slave. Now, when they did that, they had put a program in her mind to make her be madly in love with Havoc. And when I say madly, I mean extreme madly in love with Havoc, to the point where she'll do anything to be near him and to also protect him. Now, she was sent over to Muir Island, but the problem was she was too far away from Havoc. She left Muir Island and came right back over to the base of X Factor. And so now we see that that love is kind of making her go a tad bit more insane. She's having a hard time controlling her other form, her wolf form. And matter of fact, you have Polaris and Wolfbane have a late night conversation with one another. And the conversation goes completely down the wrong path because for Polaris, she's kind of like, hey, you need to go back over to Muir Island. But for Wolfbane, she said, I can't go back there unless Havoc comes with me. Because if he doesn't, I'll just leave Muir Island and come right back over to the base of X Factor. And so you have Polaris say, listen, once you have Havoc get some free time, he'll go back there with you. And that ticks off Wolfbane a lot. And the reason why, because, well, Havoc is with Polaris, and Wolfbane has seen Havoc many times go out of his way to do almost anything for Polaris, but not for Wolfbane. And it kind of shows right there that love she has for Havoc, that forced program in her mind right now, is making her act a whole lot worse than usual. Now, I want to transition over to Strong Guy and also Jamie Madrox. Now, this is really important because, well, in our last few videos, we have seen Jamie be in this state of depression. Now, in one of my earlier videos, we were kind of left to believe the reason why he's like that because he had to kill off another mutant. But there is really a different reason why he's acting a certain type of way. And matter of fact, it'll be explained to us in this storyline right here. But either way, when it comes to Strong Guy, as he's just trying to watch some TV, he's then confronted by different clones of Jamie. Now, each of the clones are kind of acting a tad bit different from one another, kind of representing a different part of Jamie. Some being sad, some being happy, some being aggressive, some being confused. They all basically represent a different part of Jamie. And so for Strong Guy, he's kind of wondering what in the world is going on. Now, by the end of this section, we do see that Jamie, the main one, is reading a book. It is called Man, Mutant, New Humanity. Now, this book right here is going to be very important later on. Now, I want to go ahead and jump back over to Polaris. And here's the reason why, because we're going to use Polaris as a way to explain what's going on with Jamie Madrox. Because like I said earlier, we were kind of left to believe in the possibility that the reason why he is so depressed because he kills somebody. But that's not the case at all. You see, this is a callback to an earlier storyline where you had this X Factor team go over to Genosha. Now, when they did, they find out the country is dealing dealing with the legacy virus. Different mutants are dying across the board, left and right. Now, one of those mutants tried to escape, and you had X Factor being able to find that mutant, but he needed CPR. And so you had Jamie use one of his clones as a way to give that mutant CPR. The problem is that when he had reabsorbed that clone, it now kind of seemed like he also got the legacy virus as well, because that mutant had the virus, gave it to his clone that he had just reabsorbed. And so Polaris, she realized why he's kind of like depressed at the moment. So for Polaris, she's not really able to go help out Jamie. Instead, she get attacked by a group of guys with guns. Now, these guys, of course, are most likely working for the government. It's them saying, you know what, let's go ahead and take out Polaris now. As a matter of fact, they have the weapons to use against her to give her an actual challenge here. As a matter of fact, it does seem like she's going to lose the battle, but at the very last second, she is then saved by no other than our new mysterious character who was able to take her away from those guys. And this begins our adventure of learning who in the world is this new character. And so as we dive into X Factor issue number 97, we do pick up with Polaris and our new character. Now, we do learn here that for our new character, her name is Haven. Now, we're going to begin to learn a whole lot more about this character in this storyline and also the next one. Now, when it comes to Haven, she does tell Polaris that she's not an enemy. That matter of fact, she's here to begin the idea of bringing in a new age of people, not mutants, not humans, but something even better than those two things right there, this new golden age. Now for Haven, she does tell Polaris, like, listen, I was able to save your life by removing you from one plane of reality to another. Now we're not really told where they are at the moment, but we do see here that for Haven, it does kind of seem like she is a good person and came here with good intentions. Now she does tell Polaris, like, listen, I'm not even going to go after Charles Xavier at all. That matter of fact, sooner or later, you and Charles are going to realize you're going to need me to help you guys out, to bring in this new golden age. Now, with all that being said, you didn't have Polaris be teleported back to where she was at when she was ambushed earlier at the end of the last chapter by those soldiers. Now, right after she does get back there, we see Haven leave. But right after she did leave, she left a book behind for Polaris to read. A book called Man, Mutant, and the New Humanity, written by Haven. Now, here's the thing. It's the same book we saw earlier that Jamie Madrox was reading in his room. Now we have to jump over to Val Cooper. Now, Val Cooper was X Factor's last liaison when it came to having that person who worked in the middle between X Factor team and also the government. Now, she did have to step down for some very good reasons, like, hey, the team no longer liked her or no longer trusts her. And so you had Forge being that person who had replaced her. Now, for Val Cooper, we see her reading the same book that Polaris and Jamie got earlier. But also for Val Cooper, it does seem like she's trying her best to reunite with X Factor, to get back on their good side once again, because right now she's technically on their bad side. But now we have to jump over to Random, and this gives us the opportunity to learn a tad bit more about the character. And what I mean by that statement is that we see Random go back home to his house, and we see that he does have a nice home, he does make a lot of money. We also learn that he does live with a woman. Now, we have no idea who she is, kind of like she could be his maid or possibly his mother. I have no idea. For me at first, I'm kind of like, okay, she's probably a maid there to help clean up the place. But then at the same time, they do say that he hired other maids to help clean up the place. Either way, with her, we do learn his real name, and it's Marshall Stone III. Now, with that being said, it's not very important, but now we know his real name. But while you have the two characters talking to one another, we see outside his home at the moment more of those soldiers who are beginning to attack his home very soon. But then we jump back over to Polaris. Now, when we do, we see that Polaris is calling up Charles Xavier. And the reason why, because she wants to tell him everything that happened to her when it comes to Haven. Now, we do learn that for Charles Xavier, he also received a book as well, like Polaris did, Jamie, and Val Cooper. But with his book, he was given an invitation to some kind of lecture that Haven is giving out. Now, apparently, the other people who got the book as well also got that same invitation. But for Polaris and Charles, they do agree that Polaris should go to the actual lecture to get a better idea of Haven. Charles can't go because he's just so busy at the moment. But either way, Polaris now has her own new mission. But right after you have Polaris being able to finish her call with Charles Xavier, you did have one of the clones of Jamie walk in. Now, this clone of Jamie had read the book and truly believes in what Haven is saying about the whole idea of the future of humanity. Now, while you have those two characters talking, another clone walks in. And this clone is really more against everything that Haven said in her book. Again, it really shows here that when it comes to Maddox and his clones right now, each clone represents a different part of him. They have their own soul, their own mind, their own personality. And so you have the two clones go back and forth about the whole idea of what they feel about the book that was written by Haven. Now, while you have the two characters arguing, you have Polaris just sneak away to finally go confront the real Jamie Maddox. Now, once she does go confront the real Jamie, she tells him that she knows what's going on with him, that he is scared of the possibility that he may have the legacy virus. There has been no test done on him to confirm he has the virus, but for Polaris, she realized the man has a fever. He does look very sick, and so there is a possibility that he does have the legacy virus. Now, for Polaris, she wants to take him over to Charles and Maura McTaggart. But let's not forget that this takes place after Fatal Attractions. And with that being said, of course, the death of Ileana, the younger sister of Colossus. And so for Jamie, he kind of believes there's no way that he'll survive the virus. It's kind of him showing that he's truly scared of possibly dying by the hands of this virus. Now, before you have Polaris being able to comfort him, you have more clones of Jamie walk in the room and, well, kick her out. Now, she does step away for the time being, but she's not going to give up. She will be back to try to help Jamie overcome the legacy virus. Now, we do jump back over to Random for just literally a brief moment because, like we saw earlier, we saw some soldiers about to break into his home to kill him off. These same kind of soldiers who most likely work for the government, who are really upset with Random for not completing his last job, which was taking down Polaris. And so we do see they break into his home, but you have Random being able to take down these guys very easily. Now, after doing that, we did jump over to the lecture that's going on for Haven and also X Factor attending the actual lecture. Now, as we jump over to the lecture, we do see that Val Cooper and also X Factor are arriving at the same time. Now, for some of the members of X Factor, there's still some bad blood between them and also Val Cooper. Now, you do have Val Cooper trying her best to sneak her way in, but unfortunately, she does run into both Strong Guy and Jamie. Really, Strong Guy, Jamie, and also Wolfbane. Now, for Val Cooper, this gives her the opportunity to see what's going on with X Factor. Like, for example, right now for Jamie, he's not doing well. And matter of fact, some of the clones are there at the lecture, but not the main one. And for Wolfbane, well, we already know that program in her mind right now is slowly changing her into a more insane character. Now, with all that being said, we do learn that X Factor, the entire team, was sent here by Havoc for a special reason. Only Polaris, Val Cooper, and technically Jamie were invited. But the rest of the crew, they were told by Havoc like, hey, I need y'all there at the lecture for a special reason. Now, the ending of this book is pretty wild because we do pick up with Haven going ahead and giving out her speech for her lecture. Now, when it comes to her lecture, she's also kind of talking about the whole idea of the golden age she wants to bring into the world. But she also basically says that she is not the one leading this change, that she's kind of just the guide for the change because somebody is telling her this thing, a more powerful being, and that being made her to be the guide into the golden age. But she's also saying that what we're seeing right now, humans and mutants, especially mutants, that is only the beginning for men. That mutants are bringing in a new kind of people, but down the road, everything is going to change. There's going to be a huge leap in the evolution of the human race. Now, while she does continue on explaining why the world needs to change and really how the world is killing itself, you then have Havoc and Forge just bust in the room and say, hey, you know what? X Factor, let's get together and let's go ahead and arrest that woman right now. And so now we dive into X Factor issue number 98. Now, when we do, we pick up with X Factor trying to arrest Haven. Now, when I say you have X Factor trying to arrest Haven, I really mean more of you have most of the team trying to arrest Haven, but you don't have Polaris. I almost called her Polaris. Polaris trying to arrest Haven. And the reason why, because this begins the process of the possibility of Polaris leaving the team. And the reason why, because to Polaris, she's kind of like, listen, we work for the government. But the same people we work for just tried to kill me earlier in the storyline. And she was the one who has saved my life. In the last video, she was attacked by Random, who was hired by the government to take her down. And so for Polaris, she's kind of like, what are you doing, Havoc? Like, just sit down and let's talk things out first. But right now, we are not going to arrest her at all. Now, once you have Polaris kind of attack Havoc, that really does tick off Wolfbane a lot. And it does kind of give us a small battle of Polaris fighting against the other members of X Factor. But it really shows how powerful Polaris truly is. Now, you do have Forward trying his best to sneak up on Haven, but the problem is Haven is really powerful. And so we see her being able to, just for a moment in time, to make it seem like X Factor no longer exists in the world, to allow her the ability to get the heck out of there. And so once you have X Factor come back into this reality alive again, well, Haven is gone. But now, at least for our heroes, they can sit down and have a proper conversation with one another. Now, once you have the X Factor team get back to their base, this begins the whole process of us actually learning everything we can about Haven, but also we kind of continue the whole idea of Wolfbane still not liking Polaris, but again, it's the program in her mind because Polaris is with Havoc. And for Wolfbane, she's madly in love with Havoc. She wants to be with Havoc so badly. But either way, you do have Polaris tell the team, like, hey, listen, Charles Xavier told me to go there to learn more about her. Now, for Wolfbane, like I said, madly in love with Havoc, she does not believe Polaris at all, especially now because Polaris had attacked them earlier at the lecture. But you have Strong Guy being able to calm everybody down, and once he does that, it leads into Forward saying, hey, you know what? Let me tell you everything we know about this character because she could be an actual threat across the entire world. Now, you have Force tell us, but also the members of X Factor, that he was able to collect all these different pieces of information thanks to kind of working with the government. Now, what he had learned is that Haven's real name is Radha Dashtur. Now, when it comes to Dashtur, she has been around since 1952, the year she was born, but after a while, she began to use the name Haven. And the reason why, because she's trying to bring in this new golden age. You see, she began to go around the world to give different kinds of lectures. Now, at first, it was the whole idea of just bringing in the golden age, but then after a while, she started to attack the so-called mutant problem. Now, it's not her saying like, hey, you know what, let's go ahead and wipe out the entire mutant race. No, it's her saying that humans or mutants are basically the same thing. They're both part of the human race. Mutants are just the next step in the evolution of the human race. Now, when it comes to Haven and her lectures, after a while, she began to talk about the idea of bringing in the new golden age. Now, the golden age is supposed to bring in a new kinds of humans, humans who are so evolved from the mutant race, so evolved from the regular human race. But the problem is, to bring in the new golden age of the human race, you have to get rid of the old. And so what she says that sooner or later, the earth is going to experience a lot of different types of disasters, natural ones and man-made ones. But with those disasters, it's going to kill off most of the earth population. When that happens, then it will lead into the golden age. But here comes her big problem. You see, the golden age is supposed to come 700 years in the future. And so for Haven, she hates the idea of waiting. She wants to go ahead and bring in the new age right at this exact moment, right now. That's her goal at the moment. And so that is why Forge and the rest of X Factor needs to bring her in. Now, even though you have Forge give Polaris all that information, for Polaris, it's really more of like, okay, and what? Like, you're telling me all of this information, but that same information came from the same people who hates you, who hates me, who hates all of us because we are mutants. Like, why should we try any more to help out the American government, even though they're trying to kill us off? And technically, Polaris is not wrong here because, again, she was attacked in the last two storylines here, this one, the last one, but at the same time, when it comes to the government, we also know about Project Wide Awake, different projects going on in the government to kind of help them get ready just in case there is a war between the humans and mutants down the road. So again, for Polaris, she's right. Why in the world should they go out of their way to help out the government to bring in Haven? But now we have to transition back over to Jamie. Now for Jamie, he's getting tired of the whole idea of having all these clones of him around him and all their nonsense chatter. And so for Jamie, he's all like, you know what? It's time for me to reabsorb you. Now, for Jamie, he does reassure us that the reason why he's so depressed is, again, the whole idea he may or may not have the legacy virus, but at the same time, he also killed somebody in an earlier storyline. But it does seem like the main problem right now is the whole idea that he might die. But either way, you didn't have Jamie try to reabsorb all the different clones that he had made. Now, he is able to reabsorb most of them except just two of them. And the question is right now, why? Why can't he reabsorb them? And so for Jamie and the other two people, they kind of believe the reason why, because truthfully, he does not want to be alone. And so maybe his powers are truly tied into, well, his emotions. Now we jump back over to Wolfbane and also Strong Guy. Now they're in a limo just, driving somewhere basically. And while you have the two characters driving somewhere, they're then confronted by good old Random. Now when it comes to Random, they know that he had attacked Polaris in the last storyline. And so for our two heroes, they believe that he's here to finish the job, to now come after them and possibly Polaris as well. But you didn't have Random say, no, listen, the same people who had hired me to bring her down are now trying to kill me as well because I had supposedly failed them. And so right now it seems like Random wants to team up with X Factor to bring those folks down once and for all. And so now we get into the ending of today's video where we do pick up with, well, Haven at her base. Now, when we do, we see that somebody had arrived at her base and they're trying to join her side. Now, at first, we have no idea who this person is. But for this person to join Haven's side, they have to go through the Paraleia. Now, the Paraleia is really when your soul is sent into oblivion. And if you're able to overcome oblivion and make your way back to this reality, then you're able to join her side. But also, you then should be able to fully understand what she is trying to achieve. And so this person's soul is sent into oblivion, and then she comes back from oblivion. Now I said she, so that means it can't be Havoc, Strong Guy, Quicksilver, none of those characters at all. Matter of fact, it is Val Cooper, who's right now trying to join the side of Haven. But this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down the road and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.